Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, friends and family of the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. We are so honored that you would come here tonight to pay tribute to two of our finest members ever. Terry Anderson and Bob Neff, Robert Neff, are people that are near and dear to why this organization has been around for nearly 80 years. And we greatly appreciate your sharing your time, your thoughts tonight, and your feelings about how these individuals matter to journalism and matter to you. We have family and friends and peers and colleagues, many of whom are not members of our organization. That doesn't matter. We're really proud to be able to say, hey, these are our heroes, and we want to pay tribute to them. I'd like to deeply thank the families of the respective journalists and my colleague to the left, Brad Martin, for really driving this moment, the recognition of people we've lost, but people we treasure. And that will not change. So with no further ado, Brad Martin.
Thank you, Dan Sloan, our president. These are the two gentlemen that we are remembering tonight were real stars. And I'm sure the people who come to the microphone later will embellish on that. But, you know, Terry was noted for his love of danger, or his disregard of danger in the service of reporting. And Bob, I have to tell you, I was a competitor of Bob Neff. And as far as the economic story, he just beat the pants off of me. He really knew what he was doing when he was covering the revisionists. I was pretty skeptical about the so-called revisionism, but anyway, these are two of the absolute greats in our club, and I think we'll start off by showing some pictures.
Recording in progress.
Okay, recording in progress. You will note that when Terry came back after having spent 7 years as a prisoner in Beirut, prisoner of the Hezbollah, when he came back and had a packed luncheon here, who presided at that packed luncheon? See if you can guess, and let's see the pictures. Okay, so we're going to play a little, not a game, but we're just going to ask who remembers certain people. So who can, let's hear voices if you know. All right, who's in the foreground here looking at the picture? Andy Adams, Sumo World.
Yeah, that's right. And the tall guy is
That's Don Kirk.
Don Kirk, and the other one is
David Powers.
Dave Powers. Dave Powers. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, David Powers was president 1 year. He went back to London. Don Kirk is still alive and working as far as I know. And he's about 3 years older than I am. So that means he's really quite ancient. But anyway, that's who those are. And they are, why are they there? Because the club had been, as I say, beating the drums to get Terry out of, I mean, of course, what we had to say didn't register much with the Hezbollah, but it certainly, I'm sure, registered with those who cared about and loved Terry, that we were doing what we could to get him out, which, anyway, he did finally get out. So there's that picture. there. Who is presiding? That would be Bob Neff is presiding. Okay. And the others in this picture, no, that the woman on the mustache is not Mike Tharp. That's Rich Reed of the Oregonian. He was first vice president. Actually, I have a list of the others, but let me see if I can find it. What did I do with it? Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's we.
There's Thomas Douglas, Rich Reed, Terry, Mr. Neff, and then Mr. Aritaka here.
And there is Terry.
And Mr. Neff is MC of this luncheon.
Who's that?
Mr. Neff.
Yes, right.
Yes. And then there's Miss Jean Pierce over there.
Oh, Jean. Some memories here of some very memorable members who have moved away and in some cases moved far away. Okay. This was a huge success. I should mention that we have special guests here tonight. We have Fumiko Sekizawa, who is Bob's wife. It's right here. And we have Gabrielle Anderson, who is Terry's daughter. And who actually works, I hear, as a lawyer right around the corner. Is that correct?
Just across the street, we made the building.
Wow. All right, so that's great. And I believe that your sister Salome is trying to watch, but I don't know if she's on Zoom or not.
Might be a little too early for her in the morning.
Yes, and her mother, her mother, Madeline, was hoping to be on Zoom also. So we welcome all of those members of the families to our evening here. Okay, let's go on with the pictures then. That's great. All right. Anybody wants to point out anybody in the crowd, go right ahead. This was 1992, July 27th. So, only 32 years ago, right? Okay. Now, anybody tell me who's the dude on the left playing dice with Terry? All right, I'm going to tell you. It's Jack Dinkin. And Jack was getting to be about 90 at that time. And the man in the center who was playing dice with Terry, any names? That's Yosh Kitakawa, right? Kawakita. All right. And who is in the front? We can't see the face of the lady there.
I think this is Gabrielle.
Gabrielle, is that you in the picture?
Maybe.
Come up and look closely and tell us.
With dressing glasses.
Yes, it is. Oh my goodness, yes.
All right. That's brilliant.
Yes, double your entrance fee in payback.
Okay. All right, and on the left it looks like Bob Kirschenbaum. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The late Bob Kirschenbaum. We lost him last year, sadly.
Let's go ahead and say, by all means, everyone can eat and drink.
Oh yeah. Don't hesitate to go and eat and drink while we're talking, while we're doing this. This is not a formal occasion, and the food and the drinks are ready for you. All right. So there, Terry is he in the main bar? He's in the main bar at a correspondence table. And who is that just to his left, to our right? Alfred Smoular, the Frenchman. Alfred was at Auschwitz and he had a tattoo on his wrist. And who's the one on the right? Kirschenbaum. That's Bob Kirschenbaum again on the right in the picture. All right, this is a great picture of the dice game. Again, Yosh Kawakita, Jack Dinkin, and Terry Anderson. Yeah, and once again, there's Yosh and there's Don Kirk and there's Terry Anderson. Don Kirk came here for the Chicago Tribune and ended up freelancing for many outlets. He used more carbon paper than any correspondent who ever worked here, because he would send out his stories to many different recipients. Yeah, there's a portrait of Terry. And that's the smile that you remember if you know him. All right. And that's the same group. Kirschenbaum's in the background, and Yosh and Don Kirk. All right. Yep. And there's Smoular. This is the same group, okay? Okay, so we've had a little more of the next pictures are mainly about Bob, right? Okay, we've had here we are. We've got Terry with the AP bureau chief and his wife in 1992. That would be Dygard, right? Tom Dygard and his wife Patricia. Yeah, okay. Anyway, he visited the AP bureau when he came back. Were you on that trip too? Okay, great. And there's Terry. He's not looking sour. He's looking skeptical. I think. And here is Bob Neff, surrounded by certain people we know.
Oh, good old days.
2010. Right. So, all right. Now, who's gonna name these people?
Jim Treese,
Jim Treese is correct.
Dennis Normile,
Dennis Normile, correct?
Mary,
No, that's not Mary.
Mary Corbett. No,
Mary's
I'm not
over.
doing it yet.
Mary's over here.
Lucy Birmingham.
Lucy Birmingham, and Bob Neff's in the middle, and there's
John Harris and Casabico.
John Harris, and then Mary Corbett, and then there is there's the other Bob K, Bob Kirschenbaum, and Kaz Abiko. And Kaz was hoping to be here tonight, but he's been sick. So luckily we have something will be read by him later. And there, okay, that's Bob Neff. And who is he? Who is the speaker? Oh well, it doesn't matter. It's all right. The important thing is that Bob is there, and he's wearing either a Hawaiian or an Indonesian shirt.
That's Lance Gatling, yeah.
Oh, Lance Gatling. Do you know? Do you guys know Lance Gatling? He told me that all three of his names refer to weapons. His middle name is William, and he says William refers to some sort of weapon. So he, huh?
He was born and raised in America.
Yes. All right. I haven't seen Lance in person for years, but we still communicate.
I had lunch with him a month ago. He's
Tell-
still doing well. He's consulting, advising, sharp as always, smart ass.
That's great. Tell him I said hi. All right. And here's Bob with, that's now, that's our other McGraw-Hill guy over here. Usui-san.
Who's this?
Kobayashi Akira, singer.
I love him.
Mr. Neff was MC this event, and Usui-san was interpreter.
Wow. That guy's maybe even older than I am. What's his name?
Sen Nishiyama.
Sen Nishiyama. The tea ceremony guy?
Yes, he's an famous interpreter of Japan. And,
Oh,
During the war.
during the war and YouTube.
okay. Great.
The Apollo mission.
There's Bob holding forth. And who is anybody know who she may be, is she a speaker? You don't remember who, okay. Anyway, it's a good picture of Bob.
This is the last one.
Okay.
That's finished.
Okay, so here we have this. Again, please get yourselves some food and drink, and
And a big hand for Brad. Thank you, Brad. Wonderful. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the rest of the evening is exceptionally informal. If you want, and we would appreciate it, come up and say a little bit about your memories of Terry or
forget we're going to ask for the person who came the farthest.
oh, we will. Yes, the person who came the farthest will get at least a 500 yen discount on tonight. No, I'm kidding.
Gets to speak first, right?
Oh, and may get to speak first. But what I'm saying is, we're going to surrender the mic, which is dangerous for two former presidents of this club or a current president.
No. I ran, and my boss ordered me to drop out of the race.
Anyway, we welcome and thank you for your presence tonight. And please come up and share a little bit about why Terry and Bob mattered so much to you.
Something for
By all means. Thank you.
Okay, tell them about that. So, Iwamoto-san reminds me that we have some information about both men up here on the whiteboard, way off here. So, stroll over there when you have a chance. Me here, do you want to start things off?
Just how far did you come?
Saudi Arabia.
All right, well, tell everybody.
there's a mic, okay.
You can wander around if that one, or you can
Stand.
go to the stand, yeah.
Good evening. Some of you know me. My name is Mihir Sapru. I was close with Bob Neff. Served the club for a number of years. Left Japan in 2005. I had to come back for this. I'd like to begin because a dear friend of mine who could not make it tonight, who I believe all of you know, former president and AP Bureau Chief Kazuo Abiko. And Kazuo Abiko asked me to deliver a few remarks on his behalf about both Bob Neff and Terry Anderson, as Kaz knew Terry as well. So I'll begin. This is Kaz's remarks on Terry Anderson. Kaz says, Terry and I worked together briefly at the Tokyo Bureau of the Associated Press before he was transferred to Johannesburg. I understand that everyone knows about the ordeal that he had gone through as one of America's longest held hostages after he was snatched from the streets of war-torn Lebanon in 1985 and held for nearly 7 years. I don't think many of you know about his excellent reporting on the Gwangju uprising in South Korea in 1980. Although it was not mentioned in most of the obituaries, he was highly praised for his accurate and fact-based reporting from Gwangju, alerting the world of facts that contradicted the formal announcements from the South Korean military regime. In fact, it was mentioned in the lead of his obituaries published by the South Korean media. While the martial law forces were claiming there were only 3 deaths, he reported, based on eyewitness accounts, that the actual number was close to 261. He was quoted later as saying that it was the first time he had seen so many corpses. Here is the anecdote that I heard from the former Tokyo correspondent, COB, Roy Asoyan. When Terry reported that the South Korean government used AR-15s or M16s, I don't recall exactly what he said, though they mean the same automatic rifles, against protesters. A New York editor questioned him if he actually saw the weapons. And his response was, I was Marine. I can tell it by the sound of gunfire. Julie Pace, Senior Vice President and Executive Editor of the AP, said Terry was deeply committed to on-the-ground eyewitness reporting and demonstrated great bravery and resolve, both in his journalism during his years held in hostage, both in his journalism and in his years held hostage. We're so appreciative of the sacrifices that he and his family have made as the result of his work. When a memorial for Terry was held at the AP's New York head office in May, former AP President Lou Bacardi delivered a nice, long speech. And in closing, he quoted Nelson Mandela, who said, I learned that courage, I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not fear, but he who conquers that fear. By that standard, we mark the painful yet inspiring journey of a very brave man. And that's what Lou Bacardi had said of Terry Anderson. As Gabrielle may recall, Roy Asoyan was kind to her and her mother, Mihoko-san, while Terry was captive. AP Tokyo normally did not accept any intern, but Roy made an exception and provided her with the opportunity in the summer when I think she was a college student. I hope she still feels a part of that very big AP family. She probably doesn't remember me, Kazabiko, as we did not have much meaningful conversation at that time. But I was looking forward to seeing her at this memorial tonight to find out more about what she's doing. Kaz, I don't know why Kaz isn't here tonight, but he couldn't make it, and very sadly so. And I know that he really would like to reconnect with you. I'm going to see him tomorrow, I'll tell him. The passing of Bob and Terry struck me deeply, especially because we were the same age, born in 1947, shortly after the end of World War II. And finally, I'd like to say, Bob and Terry, may you rest in peace. I'm sorry that I began with Kaz's remarks on Terry Anderson. Kaz had meant to say both about Bob Neff as well. And I will now move to Kaz Abiko's remarks on Bob Neff. Kaz is going to kill me tomorrow. You botched this.
We're not gonna tell him, okay?
Yeah, he's watching. It's online. Yeah.
I'm watching.
Of course you are.
Thank you for doing this for me.
I'm so sorry, Kaz. I'm buying the sake tomorrow. I really am.
Why doesn't he just do a speech?
We were worried about technical difficulties. Right?
Yep. Please proceed.
Kaz's remarks on Bob Neff. Since many of the attendants tonight are expected to speak about Bob, I would like to make a brief remark about him. A brief remark. Arriving in Japan at the age of 13, along with his missionary parents, I understand that he was soon fascinated by onsen, especially those in remote rural areas. So in addition to his insightful reporting on Japan's politics and economy for Business Week, he wrote about onsen, titled Japan's Hidden Hot Springs. I believe the book is right there. He loved Japan, and he wanted to make Japan his final home, literally to be buried in Japan. And unfortunately, that came too early. I served as second vice president during Bob Neff's administration, and we worked together for the best interests of the club, sharing the same journalistic values and principles. He also gave me judicious advice when I became FCCJ president in 2001. Charles Pomeroy, who will be 94 in November, asked me to add that Bob did a great job of writing up the fourth decade of our history book, The Foreign Correspondence of Japan. Charles was the general editor of that book. It was always a great pleasure to have a friendly chat and an intellectual conversation with Bob in the main bar. In short, he was a gentleman and a scholar, and we will miss him dearly. Finally, I would like to add my own personal comments about Bob Neff, if I can find them. Which, well, even if I can't find them, I can speak to them. It's a rare thing when you remember exactly when you met someone who became a very close friend of yours. And I remember the exact day that I met Bob Neff. It was June 19th, 1998. It was my first day in the Foreign Correspondence Club. I was coming here to meet with another two legends who have since passed, Ed Nealon and Pat Killen. I walked into the main bar that evening, and the place was crowded and packed because it was the very night that Steve Herman was handing over the reins of the presidency of the club to this newly elected Bob Neff. And I remember meeting him, and when I was introduced to Bob, I think somebody had told him somewhere that I speak a little Japanese. So Bob turns to me, and here's this I'm new to Tokyo, and I'm this young kid. And here's this older, famous journalist, well-respected, 56th president of the Foreign Correspondents Club, who turns over to me and he breaks into the most guttural Japanese slang and he goes, "Omae honto ni nihongo wakaru no ka?" And at that point, I knew I had just met my mentor and somebody who became a dear, dear friend and probably the dearest friend that I've had in Tokyo. Now, over the years, I've come to really, it was a joy being around Bob. And in fact, Bob was one of the people that inspired me to join this club, to become active in this club. And for many years, I was on the Food and Beverage Committee between the two Bobs, Bob Kirschenbaum, well, Bob Neff and Bob Kirschenbaum, who were both gourmands in their own right. And I was the guy that was right in between both of them as they argued about the right wine to go with steak, how nachos should be cooked, and of course, you know, barbecue and Sweet Baby Ray's from Kansas City as barbecue sauce. Then the conversation would devolve. Was it not Sweet Baby Ray's? Then the conversation would devolve into politics and club politics. We'd pour into the main bar, and it would go on into the evening, and all would be made right when Hanif brings another carafe of Côte d'Aron to the table. And, well, it's not on the list anymore, but that's one of the things.
Most reliable red ever.
Absolutely. So I can't tell you how appreciative I am of the years that I've gotten to know Bob and Fumiko-san. And I can't appreciate you both enough for taking me into your lives. And I remember coming to Japan, even after I'd left Japan, coming back and visiting Bob and Fumiko in Hayama, cooking together and drinking sake and having lots and lots of conversations. And Bob was one of those people that, you know, if you were talking to somebody and you'd walk away from that conversation, you'd always feel enriched. Whether you learned something new, or attained a new perspective, or just had a really, really good discussion and felt like you had talked something through. And for me, the next day, my side still hurt because I was just laughing so hard at all of the conversations that we had and all of the fun that we had. And that's how I would always like to remember Bob, and those are the cherished memories of Bob. And that's why tonight is very difficult for me, because my heart sank when Kaz Abiko told me this news, and I had to get on a plane. And I guess I regret not being here over the years, and I know the years were very hard for Bob and for you, Fumiko. And I regret not being here for both Fumiko and Bob. And most of all, I regret not being able to say goodbye. But before I got on the plane in Saudi Arabia, a friend of mine gave me a little thing to think about. Said, missing someone is not, missing someone is not about the last time that you saw them, or the time that's passed since you both talked. Missing someone is about that moment that you're doing something or you are someplace and you just wish that person was there. And I can tell you that in the 10 years that I have been away from Japan and in the 10 years that I have seen since I last saw Bob Neff, I've had that moment in many different places, in many different countries and times. Not surprisingly, they're involved a bar or a cafe somewhere. And I just thought about Bob being at the table right next to me, or at those tables over there, those correspondence tables. I remember well. I'm going to miss him tremendously, but I am so grateful and honored to have known him and to have known you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mihir. You know, honestly, I don't. it's not a can you top this, but we've got so many family and friends. We've got old AP colleagues. We've got people that have known the respective individuals for decades, and we've got family members. So anyone, please, without any reservation, come on up. The floor is yours, and the assembled here would love to hear your memories, your anecdotes, or taking the piss out of both of these guys. You'll be fine.
Is that okay? My name is Shigeyoshi Kimura. I retired from the AP's Tokyo Bureau in 2002. I have many vivid memories of Terry Anderson, including his coverage of first Tokyo G7 summit in 1979. It was really a big international event for Japan at that time, with world leaders, including US President Jimmy Carter's participating. I was deeply impressed with what Terry did on the last day of the summit. With a notebook in hand, he rushed to the public telephone booth right after the press conference was over and reported to the breaking news to the office. Scene of him rushing there is still fresh in my mind after these years. Terry was very fast in work, news collecting, judgment, and writings. Working together with Terry, I learned a lot about how to cover the international event like a G7. Terry was my mentor in journalism. Meanwhile, Terry had a sense of humor after he joined the Tokyo Bureau in 1977. I felt a change in atmosphere with Terry's humor brightening the office. He lived in Kitakamakura, surrounded by Buddhist temples. There, Terry and his wife and daughter Gabrielle-san occasionally entertained us at their residence with delicious food and funny jokes. Terry will be remembered forever as a smart and talented journalist, in addition to his survival from the 9 years in captivities in Lebanon. It was truly my honor to know and work with him. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't want to kind of call people out, but if you would, on behalf of the family, Nihongo de, either is fine. Or worse, you have me here translate for you. Yeah? All right, thank you.
I need wine, No, 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 no. This is okay. Other than that, I can't talk about Bob. 今日は皆様、ボブ・ネフとテリー・アンダーソンさんのためにいらしていただきまして、本当にありがとうございました。全くよくしてなかったので、びっくりしておりました。なぜかと言いますと、彼が亡くなったのは7月31日で、まだ1ヶ月ちょっとしか経ってないんですね。それで、one thing I really would like to tell is the Japanese, the system, within 1 week you have to do this, within 2 weeks you have to do this. I'm fed up with that one. And in the meantime, I have to, deal with the American embassy. And I'm not sleeping so well these days. And because of this weird weather, my body is reacting too much. So kind of, my activity is, if I do one day, then another day, the following day, I have to take a rest. So I'm so inefficient for everything. And thank you very much for appraising Bob so much. I think that is too much from my viewpoint as a family member. He was a very naughty boy for me. Yes, he was. We've been married 42 years legally, but we lived together over 44 years. Out of that, for 30 years, I was his nurse, for everything. And everybody said, Fumiko, why don't you get divorced? And I told them, as a human being, I cannot do that. And everybody said, that is too much. But I was not able to do that. And I was happy I didn't do that. And until he got the death sentence last year, July. Your husband's, life expectancy is only 1 month. The days kept saying, and then 1 month, has passed, then another 1 month. It happened up to this year, around around the Ohigan Dagara, around March 21st. Then next time he's gonna die is Golden Week. He survived Golden Week. Then I asked the doctor, when he gonna die? And the doctor said, around his birthday. And that was correct. He died July 31st, around early in the morning, I think. I was with him up to 2 a.m. because I was watching, Olympic games. Then I was so sleepy, so I went upstairs. Then I came downstairs within 2 hours. He was already gone to the heaven, I hope, not to the hell. Anyhow, thank you very much for kind of, doing this kind of things for him. But for me, he was a naughty boy.
Thank you. So, on behalf of Terry's family, would you kindly speak? Just a few comments would be great. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gabrielle. Closer to the mic. My name is Gabrielle, Terry Anderson's daughter. My half-sister, Salome, who's not here today, she's usually the one that does these public speeches and writing. She's the one that took over the family business of journalism, and she is usually the better one with the words. Thank you very much for holding this memorial for my father today. It has been very many years since he's last come to Tokyo. But he often talked very fondly of his days in Japan. This was his first real job, as he used to say, after he left the Marines and went to school, got qualified, and got a job at the AP. And his first station was in Tokyo. And he's often remembered for his days in the Middle East and the 7 years that he and his family, we often fondly say that he was on holiday in the Bekaa Valley. And his ordeals had shaped him quite a bit. But I think that his core was made here in Tokyo. He talked about being in Japan like it was in sort of like a wonderland. It was his first time abroad, apart from Vietnam, and there was so much wonder. And he spoke often about his days spending in the Foreign Press Club. I think his fondness for wine is rooted in in the restaurants and the bar here. He often spoke about Mr. Al Stamp, who used to be the chef, and how they used to spend many days favoring a lot of his wine cellar. And I think it was his first experience being outside of the United States. And there was no excuse for being the sort of big, loud American. And that alone is not going to take him anywhere. That he had to understand the different cultures and the history. And once you do that, that was when you get to the story that he wanted to tell the world. So I think the various nuances that he found in the language and the history of this country and the stories that he covered became the basis of his life as a journalist. I hope that his experiences and his stories and the memories will stay amongst the few people that still remember him of his days. And I think he's very grateful that there was an opportunity for everybody to remember him today. And so thank you. Thank you very much for tonight.
Okay. Again, I think we've had some incredible tributes so far. If anyone else would like to come up, I don't want to force people to speak, but honestly, we're all here to remember. I'm sure we've got our own anecdotes, our own stories that will make us laugh, cry, whatever. But I thank you so much for coming tonight. I'm going to give the mic back to Brad, and I think he has a few things to say. If anyone else would like to speak, Mary has raised her hand. Come on up, Mary. She was in one of those pictures. I don't know how many decades ago, but yeah.
Hi, good evening. We're here to honor two very dear friends and mentors. Both of them, the day I entered the club, they were famous. And I think I was very lucky to enjoy all those years under the mentorship of such brilliant people. But I just had to check with Fumiko-san that the story hasn't been told yet, because Bob had so many incredible, funny stories of the privileged, glorious life that he lived as an American kid in high school. He went to ASIJ, and so one day he was student council president. It was at the old Hilton that some of you might remember that was in Tokyo. And the high school was having a rock and roll party at the Hilton Hotel. This is privileged high school kids in Tokyo in the early 60s, I believe. But he heard that the Ventures, the band, the Ventures, were staying in the Hilton Hotel. So he went to the front desk and he says, "Hi, I am a student council president of ASIJ, and I was wondering if I could meet with the Ventures. Can you tell me what room they're staying in?" And these were the good old days in Tokyo. You know, if you're a gaijin, the front desk thinks you must know them. Yeah, do you remember those days? I some kind of remember those days. And so, lo and behold, he's knocking on the door, and somebody comes to the door, and then he goes, "Hello, I'm Bob Neff, Student Council President at ASIJ. I was wondering, we're having a party downstairs tonight. Would you guys want to come up on stage with our band?" And they talked it over, came back and said, "Yeah, okay, we'll go to your party." And they played. Bob had so many stories like that. And, you know, I learned from them. It's also kind of good old days when I think we were given special liberties just for speaking English in this town. But I think he has left us with so many of those wonderful adventures. And they were reflected in his stories. And Fumiko-san and Al Stamp, Bob, me, and a bunch of other people here too, I think. We often spent weekends tasting different wines at Al Stamp's Hakone house. We have so many wonderful memories, and I'm, of course, very, very sad that I can't relive, but I'm also thanking Bob for the wonderful memories, all the lessons he taught me in life, and always with humor and great wisdom. So, Fumiko-san, これからもよろしくね. I feel a little bit orphaned. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much, Mary. We have another speaker.
My name is Jim Foster. I feel like a real interloper here tonight because never was a member of the Foreign Correspondents Club, only had kind of intermittent contact with people with the press. I was here for quite some period of time. I do live here in Japan now. I'm up in Nagano, came down for this event. My wife Keiko is a great admirer of Fumiko, and talked with her over periods of time of some of the issues that she was dealing with. I spent 12 years at the U.S. Embassy and did everything from running the trade policy to running the political section and dealing with security policy. And in that particular period of time, I really had a chance to come in contact with Bob and appreciate his intellect, appreciate his commitment, appreciate his understanding and knowledge of Japan. He and I were on diametrically opposite sides of the equation. I was certainly not a revisionist and certainly not afraid of Japan or thinking that Japan was going to swallow Asia, if not the rest of the world. But we had incredible discussions, and I remember them very, very fondly. Some of you who've talked to me separately since then realize I can't resist talking about issues and policy and questions, and Bob was exactly that kind of person. I admired him for that, and that's why I came down from Nagano today. I'll be going back this evening simply to meet with his friends and his family, and just to get a sense of who was this guy that I had known only in a couple of different contexts, but thought I wanted to know more about. And I've had a chance to get kind of a sense of who he was and the friendships that he had and the how everybody, reacted and felt about him, and very, very interesting in that particular context. And it also, as I was reminiscing today, I guess I was hoping to see younger people here, not necessarily, younger people because we're all at a certain age. I'm nearly 75, but I kind of felt, and I guess one of the things that motivated me to come down here was that there was sort of a passing of the torch, but there wasn't anybody to catch it. And there was a time when Japan was, if not the center of the world, was certainly very much a part of the world. And for the last 15 or 20 years, I've been living up in Nagano for 15 years now, since I give just who I worked for the U.S. Embassy, then I worked for Microsoft, and then I taught at Keio University, and then I finally washed it up and went up to Nagano. But I guess, whether Bob was right that Japan was going to eat the world, or I was right that I could hardly believe it. And I think, and there wasn't any middle, because I think that all there is in Japan right now is a muddle, not a middle, where people don't know who they are, what they're doing, and why they're doing it. And it seems to me that for a period of time, people in the diplomatic corps and people in the journalism community here shared a very, very unique responsibility for caretaking this relationship, explaining it to ourselves, explaining it to our bosses back in Washington, New York, San Francisco, or elsewhere, and also explaining it and to our Japanese friends, because our Japanese friends of all need to know how others perceive them, because this is such a circular society. And so I guess I think Bob's, I came down here because I thought it was kind of not the passing of the torch, but like the end of a story. And I'm kind of wondering how it's going to change or how it's going to begin, because I don't see another generation, doing the same kind of things that Bob Neff did, doing the same kind of things that I did, doing the same kind of things that Bradley Martin did, spending time here, getting to know this place, talking not only back to our home countries about what Japan was all about, but talking to Japan and trying to give a perspective from our own experiences of how they were perceived and where they might be going, and then listening very, very carefully. So I think that's what I'm taking away from this evening. It's kind of only increased my sense of urgency that this is a relationship that's so important for both of our countries. It's a relationship that's so important for the region. It's so important for the rest of the world. And I think we need to, and whether it's the Foreign Correspondents Club, or I spent many, many years in the ACCJ. I was vice president of the ACCJ, ran for president, lost unfortunately, but you can see why. I tend to speak my mind. But I think that I wanted to just renew for myself my own commitment in the few days or few years that I've got left. And I hope for others and for the next generation that this relationship with Japan is unusual. It shaped our own lives. It shaped this part of the world in very, very important ways. And I'd like to see the positive energy from that period. And all of us do reflect that positive energy to some respect in the kind of the fond stories that we have in helping to shape kind of a new version of a U.S.-Japan relationship and a new understanding of what Japan can contribute to the world. So I'm delighted to have had a chance to meet Bob's friends. I remembered that I remembered you in some ways. And it really confirmed for me that we lived through a very, very unusual and rich time. And somehow or other, we have to pass that on to the next generation. And I think I'm taking that way as kind of a mission that I've had over the last couple of years in talking with people. And I know that a lot of you probably have similar sorts of thoughts. So thank you very much for including me tonight. I'm a complete interloper, heading back to Nagano in just another hour. May never see many of you ever again. But if you do have a chance to come to Nagano, I'm just down the street from Brad, and I think both of us would love to see you up there. So thank you very much.
So again, we'll open the floor to anyone who would like to make commentary. Jeff Tudor, I'm going to come over with the mic, okay? And I know we have some people who have sent messages in, including Anthony Rowley. So, yeah.
This is a very short contribution. Bob had a wicked sense of humour at times. And I remember going to see him 2 days after he'd had an amputation. And he'd received, through the hospital system, an invoice for 40,000 yen for the cremation of his leg, the leg that had been sawn off. And he said, now I know that not exactly what it feels like to have one foot in the grave, but I know at least how much it costs. A small remark about Terry Anderson, who was a dear friend. When he was released from captivity, and he came to Japan to see old friends and catch up with and catch up with his old comrades. And instead of staying at a plush hotel, he stayed in my apartment because my family was on holiday in Europe and the place was empty. And so he stayed with me. And we had 3 or 4 really fun days in Roppongi. And I remember one night we were going home, or we decided to go home, and a taxi pulled up, and Terry made an attempt to get in the taxi through the trunk. He said, because this is the way we traveled in Beirut when I was a hostage. Locked in the trunk of an Arab taxi. There are no Arab taxis in Roppongi, but he surprised quite a few drivers by his amusing behavior. Anyway, that was just a flashback to good times. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. I can remember literally Bob and Bob Kirschenbaum and Jeff were the overlords of wine selection in this club for a long time. So if you have any complaints, he's still here. Please talk to him. Is anyone, honestly, we want to open the floor to everybody, but we also want it to be very relaxed. If you have something that you'd like to share with the gathered tonight, great. If not, have another drink, finish up the food. But we would like to say overall, it's been wonderful. I think Brad is trying to get the list of all the people who have sent in messages, and I know it's quite lengthy. But if you have to go, go. But if you'd like to say something, please come to the mic, and we're happy to hear your words.
Hi, could we say hello from London?
Oh my goodness! Yes, we can. And please introduce yourself.
This is Hugh Sanderman and Julie, and so a warm hello to Fumiko, to Brad, to Jeff. It's wonderful to hear these tributes, to think back over all those years. We met Bob, both of us, I think, in 1980, and Bob and Fumiko, and they've been part of our lives ever since. I remember Bob as an incredibly kind, fantastically reasonable man, who is the sort of person, when you talked with him, he never kind of argued. He always reasoned. And I respected him as a journalist very, very deeply. But we were also very lucky to become close friends of Bob and Fumiko. And lucky too that when we left Tokyo in 1981, soon after, I think, Bob and Fumiko were in London the same time as us. And so we saw them then. And then even more lucky that when we moved to New York at the end of 1983, up popped Bob and Fumiko in New York. And they were for several years our neighbors in Brooklyn. And we had very small boys then. Fumiko knows that well as she's godmother to one of them. But the two of them who were born in New York, they were incredibly fond of Bob. And so the Bob and Fumiko's household was known as Uncle Bob's house round the corner in Brooklyn. And we have many happy memories of them at that time. And fortunately, we were able to see Bob and Fumiko pretty regularly over the years. Never enough, but it was enough to keep in touch. And we have hugely fond memories of Bob. He was a wonderful man. And catching up with you, Fumiko, in Tokyo when we're back next month, and Jeff and Brad. I hope you're going to be there too, but maybe not. We didn't know Terry that well. I don't think, Julie, you knew Terry.
No, we met. I met Terry.
You did meet. But I was lucky enough to be a journalist, a rookie journalist in Tokyo when Terry was still there as a journalist. I remember him as funny and kind as well. But I also remember that I have this impression of him then that he was someone with a fantastic streak of toughness in him. And of course, we didn't know to what extent that would be tested and to what extent he would come out of the terrible experience in Beirut with an extraordinary record of endurance and courage and stamina. And it's great that so many people recognized that in him afterwards and that he became an inspiration to a lot of people as a result of the terrible experience he'd been through. The only very distinct memory I have of Terry is how funny he was. And I think it was Terry's, one of Terry's goodbye celebrations that I took part in, because I have a feeling that Terry and you, Jeff, so Terry and Jeff and me and Richard Hansen, I think we went to Sapporo for a goodbye road trip. And this, if you think about Jeff plus Richard plus Terry, that does sound like a pretty dangerous combination. I think we behaved ourselves actually, but we had a good time. And from that, I have memories of how funny, really funny Terry was. So two fantastic people, really wonderful people who made so many lives richer. So thank you so much to everybody there at the FCCJ for doing all this to remember them. Thank you.
Thank you for joining tonight. Jeff, I'm not going to query you hard on whether Jell underwrote that trip to Sapporo, but I suspect there might have been some discounts involved. We do have Brad back, I think, with some of the written tributes, but if anyone else would like to say something, by all means, please. Kaz, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good evening, friends. And thank you, Mihir. I'd like to thank him for depriving me of the chance to speak myself. But his English is better than mine, so that's great. Thank you. But I'd like to add a few anecdotes that when Terry was in Tokyo, we had Bureau Chief Roy Sen often hosted the party at home for AP staffers, Tokyo Bureau staffers. And one night, Terry told me that this anecdote. He was walking on the alley in Roppongi, and the car drove past dangerously, sort of, close to him. So he said politely that "危ないですね." Then young Japanese driver man raised his middle finger and told Terry, "Fuck you." That kind of things I heard. And also, when he was assigned to Beirut, uh, former AP President Lou Bocardi was very worried about safety. So when they had the Middle East Bureau Chiefs meeting in Cairo, uh, he told Terry to be careful. And his response was just, they know me, they know the AP, so don't worry. But apparently they didn't. So when he was released and greeted by Lou Bocardi in Germany, first word he said to Lou was, "Sorry, boss." That kind of, the character that Terry was. So and also I had a very nice friendship with Bob Neff, and we exchanged many views in the main bar, and so we really I miss them, Bob and Terry. Okay. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Kaz, thank you. All right. Anyone else? Should Brad come up and maybe do some sharing from the people who could not make it tonight? But do have sent us messages. Look, it's so wonderful. I mean, this is what this club is about. We're about celebrating life, celebrating the people who have contributed to our club. And, this is not a sales pitch, but we appreciate the time of everyone that has, over the years, committed to making this the best press club in the world. And that's it.
I'll drink to that.
Yeah, me too.
I guess we haven't pointed out yet that these guys were actual contemporaries. Terry got here in 1977, joined the club in 77. Bob joined the club in 79. Terry left in 81. Bob left in 83. Bob came back, became a member again later, but roughly they were contemporaries, and that's one of the reasons why we thought it was nice to pair them up tonight, because they were two of our greatest, and at a particular time. I don't want to talk too much about how the club has changed, but in those days, you could be a serious correspondent digging deep into Japan, and you could also come around here and have a drink with your pals at the end of the day. And both of those guys did that, and so did I. And we probably spent too much of our fortune on it, but we got to know each other. That's not happening much anymore. And I don't know what the current board or any other board is going to be able to do about it, because I think the nature of the beast, in terms of, when I say the beast, I mean the nature of American correspondence and European correspondence and other correspondence, has changed. And they are not the post-war adventurers whom we were catching up with when we got here in the late 70s. I also got here in 77, like Terry. So I don't know how, Jim, I don't know how, where are you, Jim? I don't know how we replicate that again. I mean, I think our reporting was as good as current reporting. I won't say, I'm not going to argue. Let somebody else argue whether it was better or not. But we also we had a certain unity among us. And that doesn't exist anymore. That's unfortunate, and that's a good reason why the club is facing so many problems. Okay, Bob Neff, I almost wore a yukata tonight, but I came all the way down from Nojiriko, and I did not want to carry my yukata just to put it on and do a Bob Neff imitation, because, as you know, Bob Neff loved to wear yukata, and he loved to go to onsen. Here's his. This book is so good that when my big boss asked me the other day, where should I go? Where should I take my family for a really nice onsen? I immediately turned to this book to make my recommendation. Okay, so this is Bob Neff, and Bob and Fumiko and I and my wife Susan actually went on one of these onsen expeditions up in Nagano-ken, not too far from Nojiriko. And I believe it was one of the more expensive ones in Bob's book. And boy, was it something else. Anyway, if you don't have the book, try to acquire it. Is it out of print, Fumiko-san? Well, we should encourage them to put it back in print. Yeah. So I spent a lot of time down at Hayama. So did my wife. We went down there for Thanksgiving years on years, and we used to sit out in the garden with in the house that was built by Jack Spillum, the cedar house that he imported and built for the Neffs. So we had some wonderful times. Terry Anderson, I knew both here. I knew him here. I knew him in Korea. I'll talk about this in a moment. Kaz has already talked about Korea, but I'll get back to this. And I knew him again in Athens, Ohio, when I went to teach at Ohio University. And Terry had the job there previously, and he was there. So let me tell you a little bit about my encounters with Terry. I think the most memorable evening, the most memorable story that we worked on together at the same time was the Gwangju massacre in 1980 in South Korea. There were only a few of us who were covering it, and the South Koreans were not permitted to cover it. So basically, it was a few foreign correspondents who did whatever coverage there was. And once the on the last day of the uprising, I was down there, and I had ridden down with Ed Reingold, who was the Time bureau chief, and so I was in Ed's car. And toward dusk, Ed thought we should go back to Seoul and file our stories. And I didn't want to go, but I didn't have any other transportation. I was working for the Baltimore Sun, and we could not afford our own car. But, you know, they could afford 7 foreign bureaus, but only just barely. We didn't have the resources that Time magazine had. So I got in the car and went back with Ed Reingold to Seoul. Ed's still alive, by the way, mid-90s or late 90s. And I wrote my story and sent it off. And, of course, I woke up the next morning and found out that the South Korean troops had come in and taken over the city again. Well, I needed to know how many people had been killed, so I immediately contacted Terry Anderson. He had been around there counting the bodies, and he knew exactly how many bodies there were. And his ultimate figure of 261 deaths that we heard a little while ago from Kaz Abiko, I believe that's accurate, very close to the actual number. There are lots of politicians and other activists in South Korea who want to tell you that there were thousands. There were not. The leader of the uprising himself told me that afternoon, before he was killed, that there were some 200. So 200, Terry's number, it looks good to me. And his numbers I have always trusted. This man was a serious shoe leather reporter who went there and looked and saw what he saw. I'd like to read you something from John Needham, his competitor at the UPI, and his friend, who has since gone back to California, worked for the LA Times for a while. He said, Gwangju, I'd rented a room on the second floor overlooking the plaza with a great view of what everyone knew was coming. I invited whoever wanted to join me to come and join, including Terry. We were competitors and friends. Terry had a camera with him, but I don't recall it having a flash. We were all sitting on the floor most of the time, with occasional quick peeks through a window at the soldiers across the way. These are South Korean soldiers coming in to take over the city again, okay? Terry stood up, aimed the camera at the soldiers in the dark, and one soldier motioned with his hand to get down, which Terry did. When it became clear the assault was imminent, I left the room to alert other reporters. Terry, in the room, stood up again to snap off a picture or two, at which point the soldiers opened up with a barrage of gunfire, blowing out all of the windows in the room. Terry and the other 3 reporters in the room with him fell flat to the floor and did swim moves on their bellies out of the room. I saw them crawling out as I came around the corner from the stairway from the first floor to head back to the room. The quartet was smart. After the massacre, I went into the room and saw the second row of bullets penetrated the wall at the height that would hit someone who had fallen to his knees to escape the first volley. My sometimes inaccurate memory is that one of the other 3 in the room was, first name forgotten, Hamill, who said he was writing for Rolling Stone. I don't recall anything on Gwangju appearing there. I forget the names of the other 2. I did pay for the damage to the room, a laughably tiny amount of won, that's the South Korean currency, exact amount forgotten. Okay, glad you're putting out, okay. Regards to all, says John Needham, a former member of our club and an excellent one. So I knew, I'm going to talk about Terry a little bit more. I knew him after all of this, after he had been freed from the hostage condition he was in for 7 years. I knew him in Athens, Ohio, where he had been teaching at Ohio University. And I went there and taught there, and Terry had stopped teaching, and he was there spending the money that he had gotten from the Iranians. He had sued Iran for funding Hezbollah, and he got millions of dollars in return. So he was having a great time spending the money there. And one of the things he spent it on was the Blue Gator bar. And here's the T-shirt over here. You can see it. I'm giving this to Gabrielle. It is all yours now. Okay, so Terry built this beautiful bar on the main street of downtown Athens, and at New Year's he invited all of his brothers. How many brothers did Terry have? 6. And they were all sitting up there in white tie and tails. They had a kind of a balcony in the bar. So on New Year's, to inaugurate this bar, they were all in extremely formal dress. And it was a great bar. It was a wonderful bar. Meanwhile, he and his then wife Madeleine had a horse farm outside town, and Terry later ran for public office. So he to some extent the joke was on the Iranians, but I won't go into that because he truly suffered a huge amount. But anyway, that's that story. Let me read a few more little tributes here, if I may. Short is what I mean, not little. We've got one from Tracy Dalby. It says, one of my fondest memories of our time in Tokyo with Terry was around 1981 when my parents visited at the same time Terry's father was in town. The trip also coincided with my dad's birthday on November 1st. So what else to do but rent out the Bronco, the country western bar in Roppongi where the boot-wearing, mustachioed owner was a friend. It was quite the evening with the usual correspondence suspects. Correspondents hung out together at least once a week, if not more. All right. Where the boot-wearing, mustachioed owner was a friend. The live music, a guitar and fiddle, I recall, and loads of food, Tex-Mex and otherwise. My mom and dad got a kick out of it, and I think Terry's dad did too. In any event, it left my parents with a fondness for Terry long after they went home to the Seattle burbs. When Terry was taken in 1985, my parents felt simpatico with Terry and, like many folks in America, took it as personally as if somebody down the block had been kidnapped. When Terry was freed after all those years, I think they felt it was like a neighbor coming home. On the other hand, my reunion with Terry post-captivity was purely by chance, said Tracy Dalby. I had just returned to New York from Tokyo, where I'd been lucky to get out of town before a big snowstorm shut down Narita. It was evening. I was glad to be home, and I probably didn't feel like taking my dog for her usual spin around Beekman Place in Midtown, but nature called. When we rounded the corner on Mitchell Place and headed down the sidewalk for First Avenue, I saw a man with a familiar footballer's frame get out of a taxi in front of the Beekman Tower Hotel, and even though his back was turned, I knew immediately it was Terry. He'd been out for several weeks and was making what I think was his first post-release visit to New York. After I'd taken the dog home and returned to the Beekman, Terry and I talked in his room for an hour or so, chatting about nothing earth-shaking as far as I can remember, but just as two friends reestablishing coordinates. If I felt glad to be home from foreign parts, I can only imagine the depth of what Terry felt that night. And when he's talking there about talking in the room for an hour or so, both of these guys were great talkers. Terry and Bob, you could talk with them for a long time, and you would always learn something. So, we're not messing around here when we memorialize these two guys. They were really something. I've got a few more here, but would somebody else like to come up and talk in the meantime? Okay.
Okay, so Bob and Urban were mates. Bob obviously was at Business Week, Urban at the Wall Street Journal, based here, and apparently we have Urban's
Hello,
message.
From Vancouver, Washington. I'm Urban Lehner, and I'm a longtime friend of Bob's. I wish I could be with you in person to remember him. His passing saddens me more than I can say. Please forgive me for sending this video tribute instead. I met Bob in the late 1960s at the University of Michigan. He was executive vice president of the Student Government Council. I was an editor of the student newspaper, the Michigan Daily. We weren't close. We had a friendly reporter-source relationship. Those were the days. In the name of student power, these were the 1960s after all, Bob's Student Government Council had rewritten the university's rule book on student conduct. Never mind the university's insistence that students didn't have the authority to do that. They did it anyway, and we at the Daily egged them on. The next encounter with Bob was in 1980 when I arrived in Tokyo with the Wall Street Journal, stopping by the Yurakucho Denki Bureau to apply for FCCJ membership. I was handed a note from Bob welcoming me to Tokyo. I didn't even know he was there. I didn't realize that he was working for McGraw-Hill. My wife, Nancy, and I began to see a lot of Bob and Fumiko. We traveled together. The four of us rented a weekend house in Gora in Hakone that had piped in hot springs water, and for a couple of years we spent a lot of weekends taking baths together, not together successively. Later, as our careers took us to different cities, we traveled to visit each other. When Bob published his book, Japan's Hidden Hot Springs, I told him I would review it for the Asian Wall Street Journal, of which I was then the editor, if he and Fumiko would take me and my family on a tour of some of their favorites. They did, and their favorites were great, and I wrote a glowing review, which the book objectively deserved. It wasn't the first time that I praised Bob in print. In the summer of 1968, I wrote an editorial in the Michigan Daily about Bob's starring role in the quote-unquote great bathroom controversy of that summer. Bob and two of his buddies were summer orientation leaders in a dormitory that was being converted from women only to coeducational. The bathrooms were being rebuilt. Bathroom availability was limited. Bob and his buddies were incommoded, as my editorial put it. Bob called up John Feldkamp, a nice guy who was the university's housing director. John said, "Oh, come on, Bob. You can stand to be inconvenienced for a couple of days." That wasn't what they wanted to hear. Donning towels and bathrobes, they trekked out to Feldkamp's residence and demanded to use his bathroom. Feldkamp laughed. They barged past him. They found the bathroom where one of them shaved, one of them brushed his teeth, and Bob tried to take a shower, soaking the bathroom floor in the process. In the end, Feldkamp promised he would personally inspect the work being done on the dormitory bathrooms. Bob and his buddies were rewarded for their creativity in making their point. Alas, I don't get to Japan very often these days, but I did make a couple of tours in recent years, and both times I got the chance to go out and visit with Bob as his health declined, most recently a few months ago. I'm only sorry that those visits weren't more frequent. Bob Neff was a born leader. He was a first-rate journalist and he was a dear friend. I will miss him terribly.
Urban Leonard there. Okay, so I'll read a note from Anthony Rowley, who, if you have seen our #1 Shimbun, wrote a piece about Bob already. Anthony obviously worked with Bob. They were rivals in a 1998-ish kind of election. But I think Anthony's respect for Bob will be forever. I'd like to offer a very sincere and respectful farewell or au revoir to you, Bob. If there was a roll of honor at the FCCJ, which there should be, your name would surely be inscribed high upon it. You were, in my view, the very model of what a good member of the club should be: calm, collected, upright, and decent. Until we meet again, travel safely, and God be with you, Anthony. Okay. So I'm kind of looking back at some of the things that have already been sent. I think many of these have been read already. So again, I'd like to open the floor. If anyone is here, and you know, we have so many great folks with connections to our respective stars tonight. If you want to say anything, it's great. If not, yeah, if there's something else, Brad, please. But what I want to say, moreover, we're going to close it at 8, as was the schedule, but we don't like doing memorials. Sadly, you know, we have a demographic in this club that is unfortunately not getting any younger. But for the people who basically made a future for this organization, they're right there. Terry Anderson, Robert Neff, thank you very much. If anyone wants to come up, it'll be open mic from here on, but thank you, and have a great night, everybody. Bye-bye.